as I'm sitting here doing the rundown going into the week, thinking about the topics that we want to cover here in the week leading up to the first weekend where we're going to have college football on Saturday, I was taking some stock of our superstars in the sport. And I have a piece that's coming out on foxsports.com that is going to rank the 100 most important superstars in the sport. Popularity, production, what can you expect? And this is a wild year for me, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this particular story is because there is no far and away Heisman favorite going into the season. Now, that turned out to be the case last year for some, right? Wasn't for us because, well, Caleb Williams had won the Heisman Trophy and wasn't out of the realm of possibility that he was going to go back-to-back with that. Now, it helps that Caleb Williams wasn't that great and that USC was way worse than we expected. And then you have Jaden Daniels having a season among seasons, one of the three best seasons that we've seen, I want to say, the last 10 years at a minimum. Thinking about Joe Burrow, thinking about Cam Newton, so forth, so on. Derrick Henry at Alabama. We don't have a clear-cut star in this sport. We have clear-cut superstars, but we don't have a clear-cut Heisman favorite as a star. And the way I get at that is, if you can tell me the difference between a Shedeur Sanders and a Quinn Ewers, we begin to talk about these things. If you tell me the difference between a Dylan Gabriel and a Travis Hunter, we can begin to talk about these things. But on the football field, I was taking stock of a position that many of us know and many of us like because it receives a lot of attention, probably too much attention at times, and that's wide receiver. Wide receiver is a dependent position. You have to have someone throw you the ball to show what kind of skill set you have. It all starts with that. Otherwise, you could play tight end and just be a glorified blocker when we run our wing T, right? You could do all of that. That's not what wide receivers want to do. They want you to throw them the ball so they can do something acrobatic to go catch it and then make a play after the catch, go score some touchdowns. And as I'm thinking about this list and I'm thinking about the players that could make this list from the wide receiver position, I can get all the way through most of the Big Ten, through most of the ACC, through most of the Big 12 before I can land on five guys from the SEC, because I was thinking about this from the standpoint of Alabama. Alabama, according to the Associated Press, is number 5 in the country. Okay, same thing in coaches poll. I have them at 9. It's a top 10 program. But to be number 5, I think you have to have at least one receiver that is a cut above the rest. You have to have one guy. In the SEC, the best receiver in the entire league is at Missouri. It's Luther Burden. He had 1,200 yards last year. Then you got to go all the way down to Trey Harris at 985 at Ole Miss before you start to talk about the second best receiver in the SEC. Think about that. That used to not be the case. You could have had 3 of those dudes at Alabama alone. Now, they're very young too. They have Ryan Williams working out with Jeremy Bernard and my Owaso's own, Tulsa's own Cole Adams with the ones on the Alabama Fan Day. And Ryan Williams is the guy that I think is wildly being underplayed and underrated because we don't talk about him nearly as much as we talk about Jeremiah Smith, even though Ryan Williams became the first 2-time Mr. Football out of the state of Alabama. Really outstanding wide receiver, right? I could say the same thing about Ryan Wingo at Texas. I could say similar thing about Cam Coleman at Auburn. But those guys are unproven, right? We have a lot of popularity, a lot of potential around those guys. But if you're asking for production, you're going to look to Tej Johnson at Oregon. You're going to look at Zachariah Branch at USC. You're going to look at Emeka Ibuka at Ohio State. I mean, I can keep going down the list here. You can go to the Big 12, look at Jaden Higgins at Iowa State. You can look at Territoria McMillan at Arizona. You can look at Brendan Presley and Rashad Owens at Oklahoma State. You could look across college football and more or less find 5 or 6 guys that you think can contend, right? I really got a hard time with the SEC right now because we need to see that guy step up. I think Dylan Bell at Georgia, I've left him out because I thought somebody was going to get here, but nobody was going to get here, right? It's one of these questions that I'm constantly asking about the sport. Who are the guys that outside of college football, super fandom, hard-nosed, purveyors of the sport like us resonate wildly, right? Like most folks know Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter's name, even if they don't watch or follow college football all that closely, or even at all in many cases. And then what is our sport? Our sport is quarterbacks, just like the NFL, just like high school football for that matter. And then it's running backs. It's guys like Ollie Gordon and Donovan Edwards, who ain't do nothing much and nothing in 2023 in the regular season. But because he's on the cover of that video game that's now over 500 million in sales, everybody who doesn't know Donovan Edwards is going to know Donovan Edwards, right? And then you're thinking about what your tailbacks have been like in the last few years. You have a walk-on that was an All-American in Cody Schrader at Missouri, right? You, for the first time in a couple years, don't have really a brand name at tailback for Alabama. We're talking about guys that can do it, like Jam Miller can do it, but people don't know who that is right now. Whereas Trevor Etienne, we know him because of the name recognition of his brother, Travis, but also what he was doing at Florida before transferring. I can keep going up and down the line on this one. And that's what I found to be really interesting and not enough conversation. It is a dependent position, but you must have it. You must have a guy that can win one-on-ones against other people's DBs. It's why at LSU, a lot of this is going to be on Kyron Lacey's shoulders. Can he be the kind of productive wideout that Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors was? To that matter, those guys answer the question about can they be as productive as Jamar Chase, as Terrace Marshall, as Justin Jefferson. Like, there's a standard here that we are not always going to hold these guys to, and I think we need to start doing that in this new age of college football. I think as we're getting into the SEC and the Big Ten, getting 3 or 4 teams into the college football playoff with that large berth based on their ranking, I want you to take a look at which one of these programs has a wide receiver who showed up to absolutely shut it down at least once this year. Because the thing that I think held Alabama back isn't Jalen Milroe, and it certainly wasn't the defense. I think it was the lack of options at wide receiver. You had Isaiah Bond leading a unit that had him with 46 catches, 668 yards receiving. That is not a recipe for winning a national championship in this day and age. I realize that many of y'all believe that Michigan just did that, and I'm going to say it's going to get really hard to do those sorts of things here now. You're going to be able to win from all places. And even Michigan, they would tell you, when they had to throw the ball to Colston Loveland or Roman Wilson, those guys were there. And that's what I think you need, right? Isaiah Bond is the guy I pick on because you needed him to make a play against Auburn, and he did. But in as far as running the offense through your passing game, it's not something that they really wanted to do at Bama. Even so, Jalen Milroe ends with 2,800 yards passing, and he didn't even play a game, right? He got benched for the South Florida game. He might be a 4,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher, 40 TDs total, but he's going to need one of these dudes or 3 of these dudes to step up in a tremendously big way. And that's why I wanted to flag this as we get started playing football for the first time in just a little while. Like, we're days away now, and I'm so excited about it. Let me know, do you think Ryan Williams will have a better freshman year than Jeremiah Smith or any other freshman wide receiver in the sport?